welcome to a walk with Tilly. Say hi, Tilly. Good girl. Okay, well, welcome to another walk with Tilly on just another look at that sky. That's actually a pretty accurate interpretation of the colours. It's just stunning this evening, and still lovely and warm despite being 8:30 in the evening. We're still comfortable in a t-shirt and shorts, which is quite pleasant. So anyway, we're out for a nice stroll, and I've had my half an hour chill time, so now it's time to get myself cross. So Brexit. Let's discuss. I think we ought to do a regular weekly Brexit update. So interesting bit of news I caught on another YouTuber's channel, and that is the benefits of Brexit in economic terms are outweighed by the costs by 178 times, and that is using the government's own figures. What WTF, as people younger than me once said a while ago. This is just ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. We are now and the two people which either one becomes PM are both fully on board with Brexit, whilst at the same time claiming that they are fiscally prudent, and the Conservative way, the Tory blue way, is to make the economy stronger. Well, it's utter rubbish. It's just, what do you say? How do you address that? I mean, I know we are going through a period of liars being in charge of the show, but this is of a new order, isn't it, Tills? Eh? It's so they will stand at hustings in front of a group of people and say the economically responsible thing to do is, and then both claim that Brexit is good and they're pro-Brexit. Well, those two things don't work. It's just there are other reasons you could put forward for suggesting that Brexit is a great idea. They'd all be wrong, I think. I haven't found anything yet that appeals to me as a good constructive idea. The things that they seem to like. Okay, so there are. It's not logically inconsistent that they are promoting this idea, but fiscally, it's twaddle. The figures are in from all the comparable countries, and there is an exception. There is one country that is failing harder than us, and it's Russia, who obviously are undertaking a relatively unpopular war amongst those countries that have power and influence. So, there's an awful lot of trade sanctions actually been imposed on them, as opposed to them having a bunch of half-wits who are stupid enough to promote an idea where you put forward sanctions on your own country, economic barriers to trade on your own country. These things, and the data is in. Trade works when across international borders. The more trade you do, the better your economy works. There are arguments on the left, or towards the left end of the spectrum, that you could, in theory, have much better pay and conditions for your workers if they weren't open to competition from other parts of the country, but the other parts of Europe. But that falls apart entirely when you're still quite entitled to have whatever pay and conditions for your workers, regardless. The pay and conditions for workers in the wealthier countries within Europe are actually far better. So it's just not, it doesn't hold out. Tilly, this way, Tilly, come on, Tilly. It doesn't stand up to scrutiny. But essentially, of the developed economies, we are now not firmly last in pretty much every metric. We have higher inflation, and it's a bit higher than everybody else's. Well, let's just look for the thing that other people haven't done, shall we? Oh, right, that's it. What a surprise. They haven't actually imposed sanctions, economic sanctions on themselves. GDP is down a bit. Exports down a bit. It's literally every metric, and the government won't actually put in a specific report related to break down exactly what the harms are, because guess what? They all supported Brexit. It's just mental. And the ones that didn't support Brexit are now going, yeah, it's a good idea. Yeah, it's a good idea. Well, why? Why would they do that? Why would you actively not only say something that isn't true, but obviously aware of the facts prior to the situation, make a decent, reasonable argument for why they're false, and then change your mind? There's one reason. There's one reason only, and that is the bit that stops it being a logically inconsistent decision, and that is the bonfire of red tape. Because we all know it's not a bonfire of red tape, it's a bonfire of regulations. The regulations that mean water companies don't pour raw sewage into our rivers. The regulations that mean people don't have to work like slaves for ludicrous hours, that can rely on earning a wage that may be enough to actually allow them to exist. They don't even exist. We're talking about wages being so low now that people who are in gainful employment can't afford to put a roof over their head and feed themselves. They are going to food banks. They are having to beg for food. This is Victorian England. It's just ludicrous, and guess what? It's not right enough. This is not economically harsh enough. At the same time, there are reductions on tax on bankers' pay. Why? Bankers don't know what to do with it all. Certainly the ones at the top of the spectrum. I'm not talking about your average teller who is on, well, hardly any of them exist anymore because nearly every branch is closed, and the ones that do are essentially probably on negligible wages anyway. The people I'm talking about are the individuals whom are effectively trading money and commodities for margin. They are vultures. I once heard it said that Goldman Sachs is the vampire squid wrapped around the face of humanity. And I think that's probably not far off of the truth. They aren't. They are pretending to put arguments of what they're adding, but they're not adding. They are. So the donors of the Conservative Party are in a position where getting rid of red tape, which essentially is regulation, will be regulations, things like health and safety. And you can see it in the control of the media saying, putting together not news items, but they'll put in opinion pieces, and they will have commentators on the television saying, using phrases like health and safety gone mad, because essentially poor people who aren't unionised or who are employed on things like building sites the building sites and the employers have to make sure they wear hard hats, high-vis clothing, are not forced to work in unsafe conditions. How can this still be up for debate? It's difficult and depressing that in the 21st century there's an effective push to convince people to give up what little rights you actually have, and it's working. And Brexit is a cover for that. When we were part of the EU, there were no limits on how much health and safety you brought in, no limits on how higher qualities, working conditions you gave your employees. You could make them as high as you like. There were just minimum standards. So the Richie Sunak video of him shredding all that regulation is one thing he's shredding, and that is the lives of the people who are not in a position to fight their case because their unions have been taken away or are being gradually dismantled, and they are being convinced that it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter. It matters a lot. It should matter to every damn person out there, and if it doesn't, there's something wrong with you. If you're not concerned about the working conditions of your fellow citizens being of a high standard, then there's something wrong with you. It doesn't matter if you vote for Brexit or not in that respect. You should want high standards and working conditions for your fellow citizens. It's the decent thing to do. And what I know is that with certainty is that the next Prime Minister and the current one don't want that. They don't care about that. The current one may just be apathetic to it and just not bothered, but the other two are quite actively, happily acting on behalf of whoever wields the influence and power behind the scenes of the Conservative Party, which I would be not surprised to discover were effectively incredibly wealthy industrialists and banking executives, and their sponsoring of various different think tanks that they never admit who pays for them, whilst they promote the agenda that benefits those industries that pay the bills and say they don't. People are actually now starting to point this out. I did see a BBC program. No, it might have been ITV. There's a program discussing the power generation and the big profits, and there was a gentleman from a think tank on there, and the other panellists did point out that the think tank he operated for were paid by the power industry, and his response was, yes, but that doesn't mean that we represent them in any way. Okay? Unless we reach a point where this is corruption, unless we actually start to address who these people are and why they're saying what they are, and the fact that their funding only comes from industrial sources, and they never make a finding that is against those industrial sources that I know of. If anyone watches it, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I've certainly not seen one. Then any contribution they make should be clearly stamped up as incredibly likely to be incredibly biased. Anyway, that's my thoughts for today. Let's see what tomorrow's got in store. Come on, Tilly. Good girl. And Tilly's having a lovely time. And she is tracking back and forth looking for deer poo. I have a dog that likes to eat deer poo, but she's very cute. Anyway, look at the sea. Look at that evening. Look. It is absolutely beautiful. Another stunning evening. I think there's even some rain forecast in the next week or so, thunderstorms. So that will be interesting, because as you can see, everything is really parched, incredibly dry. I don't think I've probably known it ever this dry. But it's nice when you look up and there is a crystal clear blue sky. Bye for now.